Hello everyone, welcome back to another video of Q programming. Today we'll be covering conditionals in Python. Before we get to the coding, I would like to sink in the idea of what a conditional is and why it's necessary in programming. Conditionals are basically blocks of code used to see if certain conditions are met and run pieces of code accordingly. They are very simply used to check whether a condition is satisfied or not. It is evident these will be useful in programming, since the output of a program can depend on the input given by the user. Different kinds of values may lead the program to give different kinds of outputs, and conditional statements help us fulfill that purpose. So now you will see that conditional statements depend on Boolean values. As I have said before, Boolean values can be true or false, and they occur when we use comparison operators to compare two values. And not just comparison operators, we can use logical operators, membership operators, or identity operators. We have covered these in our operators video. So if you aren't quite clear with these concepts, I would recommend going back and watching the video or reading up on it again and practicing a few more questions because we're going to be using them a lot over here. Okay, so what you see before you is the general syntax for a conditional construct. Don't worry, you don't have to learn it right away, you will learn it over time. When you do more and more questions and when you use it more and more, you will learn it anyway. You don't have to learn this, I'm just showing this as a very general form of what we will be using very specifically later. Other than that, you just have to keep a few things in mind like indentation. Just to indicate that this, whatever is written over here is part of this, you need to give it an indent of 4 spaces. I mean, you can give as much indent as you want, but whenever you go to the end of the line, whenever you press tab, wherever it takes you, that's where you should start writing your code inside it. And usually, whenever you put a colon and press enter, it will automatically give you a few spaces ahead to indicate that this part, whatever I write over here, for example, if I write print hello, this is inside the if. So yeah, it is you. This indentation is very needed in Python, and because Python is an indent sensitive language, you can't mess it up. You have to be consistent with your indentation. I can't do print hello and suppose this. This is wrong. This is very wrong. You can't do this. Why can't you do this? Because this is not at the same indent as this. If I do this, then it's fine. So you just have to keep in mind that you need to stay consistent with your indentation inside a certain block of code. Now how you write that, I will talk about that right away. But just I wanted to tell this before that indentation isn't necessary, and this what I have written over here again is a general syntax. No need to memorize it right away. Alright, now let's talk about the if part. Now the if part will work in such a manner that I will pass a condition after writing if, and if that condition leads to a true boolean value, and the condition can be from comparison operators, logical operators, membership operators, identity operators, anything. If the condition is true, if it leads to a boolean value of true, then whatever is inside the if, whatever I've indented inside the if will run. The control will go over there. For example, if I have x equals 10 and if I say if x is greater than 5, now see what I did. I first wrote if, which is the keyword, and I wrote my condition. Okay. Now I can press colon. I'll write a colon. So whenever I press enter, it will take me 4 spaces ahead to indicate that this part, whatever I write now, will be inside the if. If I write here, let's do it this way, right? So let's say this is what I have written. So this part of the program will only run if this condition results to be true. And you can put as many statements as you want here. But if I want to put something that will run anyway, regardless of the condition, I just need to press backspace and I will be taken back to the same indent as if, which means we are outside it. So here I can write this is outside if, for example. So if I run this code right now, you will see both of these print statements getting executed. Firstly, this print statement is executed because x is greater than 5. So this statement, this Boolean statement happens to be true. So ultimately this will print. X is greater than 5 did get printed, and also this statement. But if I suppose pass a false value over here, suppose I write x equals 3. Now 3 is obviously not greater than 5, so this results in a false Boolean statement. And since that is the case, this print command will not be running because this became false. This will only run when this Boolean command is true. So obviously only this last print command will get printed. Watch. So now you can see this print command just didn't happen as I just explained because this became false, right? Now let me try, and I'm going to give you another example because right now we use comparison operators. Now I will show this with a membership operator. For example, and we know that membership operators are used in sequences such as strings, lists, and tuples. So if I have a string, say Q programming, and if I say if Q in X, I have written my condition, Q in X is my condition, and if I press colon, again it will take me to an indent on its own. I'll write Q is present in X. Alright, and if we do that and if we run this, you will see both of these print statements getting executed because Q in X is a true statement. But if I change the string and I make it, suppose apple, I don't know, that's the first one that came to my mind. Anyway, so if I do this, now this statement became false because Q is not present in X anymore. So this print command will not be able to run because this became a false Boolean statement. So what will run is whatever is outside the if, right? And hence this is the only thing that got printed. Okay, now let's talk about the else part. Now, this is used as an alternative if the condition inside if is not met, meaning it results in a Boolean value of false. For example, if I have x equals 10 and I said if x is greater than 5, put a colon, it will give you the indent. It should print greater than 5. Now this will print if x is greater than 5 is true, which it will be for x equals 10. Right? But what if I want an alternative that runs if this statement becomes false? That's where the else comes in. You go back to the same indent as if and you write else and you put a colon. If you press enter over here, this will again take you to an indent level which will indicate whatever I write over here will be inside else. And I can print here not greater than 5. Alright? And just to demonstrate, I will also put a print command outside both of these. Yeah, my bad. Yeah, okay. So as you can see, what I have done here is I have put an if command and an else command with it. The if command will, whatever's inside the if, will run only if this statement is true. Otherwise, this will run, right? And it's an alternative. But just remember, both of these can never run together. Only one of them will run. That is obviously because these will run on opposite statements, opposite Boolean values, right? So suppose I run this. You will see that since this Boolean statement happened to be true with a comparison operator, it printed greater than 5. And obviously this final one also got printed because this is outside it. So once this command is done, it will say I don't need to go to the else because I have already executed if. Hence, this is my final value, right? But if I write something like 3, which is obviously not greater than 5, we saw up here the if won't return anything. But if you have attached an else to the if, the control will go to the else and it will print this and obviously this at the end. So as you can see, it printed this. That was the first thing it printed. And then it printed the final thing that I put outside the conditional construct. And this is how if else works. And the reason I'm demonstrating why this is outside, because you have to be very careful of the indentation. If I move it inside the else, this won't print for x equals to 10. Watch. Because now these two print commands are inside the else. Okay? So that's why indentation is important when programming in Python. And don't worry if you're not quite getting the hang of it, it only takes practice. So yeah, we'll do a lot of questions today as well. So at the end of it, you will hopefully be a little more clear on how to indent properly. Alright, now let's move on to the elif part of the conditional construct. Now elif is used to say basically if the previous conditions are false, the computer should try a new Boolean condition. If that Boolean condition is true, it should run whatever is inside elif. That is the basic gist of it. For example, if I have x equals 5 and y equals to 10, alright? If x is greater than y, print x is greater than y. Now see what I'll do. Instead of putting an else, I'll say elif x is less than y, print x is less than y, else print they are equal. Now observe this program carefully. What I did is, I first asked the computer to compare x and y. Now x is greater than y in this case will obviously be false. So the control will not go to this print statement. So it will go below. Now the elif part, what the elif part does is it will see are all the previous conditions before that condition false. In this case, yes. So the control will be given to it. In case the condition in the elif is also false, it will go below. If there's another elif, it will run that, otherwise it will directly go to the else. Watch what the output is. It will print x is less than y, which is what is happening over here. But on the other hand, if I just write x equals 5 and y equals to 3 suppose, in which case the first condition is met, then it will print x is greater than y, which is what it should. And if I make them equal, what's gonna happen is first it will check if x is greater than y. No, it's not. So the control did not go here. Then it will say, okay, since this statement became false, so let's say try a new statement. That's what ls says. It says try a new statement. X is less than y. That also is false. 5 is not less than 5. So this part did not get control either. So the else part will just get the control if all the conditions before it are false. And this doesn't, the else part does not require a condition in front of it. It will just do whatever is inside if all the previous conditions are false. Alright? Okay, using the concept of elif, let's design a grade system. What it will do is, it will input the marks from the user and assign them a grade based on these parameters. That the student gets an A if their score is between 90 to 100, the student gets a B if their score is between 80 to 90, and so on. And anything less than 50 is an F. Okay, let's do this. So first thing you want to do is input the marks. So marks equals to input, enter your marks, and since I want it to be an integer only, I will put the int around it. I have talked about these conversion functions in the data types video. Okay, so first thing we do is input the marks. Now that we have done that, we say if marks is greater than 90, print A. That means they got an A grade. Fair enough, that's what it should do. Now, if I write if marks are greater than 80, print B. Now this code is logically flawed. Let me explain why. Because if I enter something like 95, this statement is true and so is this statement. 95 is greater than 90, 95 is also greater than 80. And these two if commands are independent of one another. That means the execution of this does not depend on this being false or true. This will just run its own way. So watch it, and by the way, since the input can't be seen on the screen, I will just print whatever I input. Okay, so if I enter 95, you will see it prints A and B because these are independent of each other. These conditionals will be checked regardless of whether this was false or true. Okay, so to correct that, we will use an elif. And now we can just extend this all the way. Elif marks are greater than 70, print C. Elif marks are greater than 60, print D. Elif marks are greater than 50, print E. Else, print F. Now why I have put this printf inside the else is because all of these conditions are false. That means the marks obviously are less than 50, and that's what the condition for a grade F was. Okay. Now if I run this will run perfectly without any flaws. Logically it's completely correct now because I have used elifs instead of ifs. So if I enter which should be a C, something like 76, you will see it return just the C. Even though this is technically correct, it will not run it because this became true. So automatically all other elif commands are rejected directly because they depend on the fact that this should be false, right? Okay, now let's talk about nested conditionals. So I will be explaining this through an example. So read the example I've written here. Write a program to take the age of the user and tell them if they're a child, a teenager, or adult. Children are everyone who are 12 and below, and adults are who are 18 and above. So, according to this scheme, we need to write a program that will take the age and tell whether they are an adult, a child, or a teenager. So, just for the sake of assumption, I'm going to give the age any random value. We'll keep changing it later to see if it's working for all the different cases. So now first I would like to create it in such a manner that if age is less than 18, this would mean that whatever I put inside this if should be for a non-adult, for someone who is obviously less than 18 years old. But according to the example here, it says there are two cases when the age is less than 18. Either they're a teenager or a child. And according to the parameters, children are everyone who are 12 and below. So if age is less than or equal to 12, then print child. Else print teenager. Now how I've done this is, first if the age is less than 18, which obviously means they're not an adult, so if the age is less than or equal to 12, I will tell the user that according to the scheme they're a child. Otherwise, if that's not the case, then obviously the age must lie between 12 and 18 because this condition is also then invalid. Obviously this is what is going to be true. Between 12 and 18 they're going to be a teenager. So yeah, that's the scheme here. And finally, if this condition of age is less than 18 becomes false, that means age is greater than or equal to 18, then I will create an else for that and I will print adult. And now this is again when this condition age is less than 18 is false, that means age is greater than or equal to 18. So as you can see, what I have done here is I have nested this if else condition inside another if, and that is what nesting conditionals is all about. Now let's run this, and according to the program this should print 10, this should print a child. Let's see. Okay, it printed that. Now if I change the age to someone who should be a teenager, suppose 16, they're a teenager. Okay, now if I take an age greater than 18, suppose 25, this is printing and run. So you can see this program works correctly, and we have done this through a nested conditional. That means an if else is put inside another if. Okay, now that we're done with this example for nested conditional, there's another example I would like to discuss, which is this. It is to write a program to check whether a given year which is entered by the user is a leap year or not. And for reference, in case you don't know what a leap year is, it is when the year is divisible by 4 But if the year is a century, meaning something like 2000, 1900, basically the last two digits should be 0, then it should be divisible by 400. So to use this, we are going to use one critical operator called modulus operator, the percentage sign. I have discussed this in the operators video. What it does is it tells me the remainder upon dividing two things. And before I show you the code for this specific problem, I would like to just quickly show you how that can be used over here. So whenever we divide two things and the remainder is 0, that means they are divisible naturally. So first, if I want to check if the year is a century, I will have to check its remainder with 100. For example, if I check 1500% 100, you will see 0 because it is a century. It has two zeros at the end of it. So dividing it by 100 led to a remainder 0. But if I keep something like 1504, then it would show me 4, which is obviously not 0. So this is not a century. And similarly, we can just do this with 404 depending on whether it's a century or not. Let's write the code for it. So first we will input the year in the integer format, right? And we're using the int function to convert it to a string because by default this will be taken as a string and we need to perform integer operations on it. So we will convert it to an integer. So first we will input the year, and then first thing we need to do is check whether the year is a century or not. So if year percent 100 equals 0 means is it a century? I just demonstrated if the last two digits are 0 and if you put year percent 100 it will come out to be 0. So if it's 0, then I'll enter it. Now I need to check its divisibility by 400 as it says. It should be divisible by 400. So if year percent 400 equals 0, print leap year. But if it is not divisible by 400 yet a century, I will put an else to this condition that it's not divisible by 400. That means if it's divisible, we'll print leap year, and if it's not, we will print not a leap year. And if the year is not a century at all, we will give the control to the else part for this if. And over here, I'll say, now if it's not a century, that means it should be divisible by 4. So if year percent 4 equals 0, print leap year, else print not a leap year. So as you can see, I have divided my program majorly into two conditions. The first condition is whether it's a century or it's not. So the control will be given to the if part if it is a century, and the control will be given to the else part if it's not a century. Inside the if part, we will check if it's divisible by 400 because that's the condition we're given. That if the year is a century, it should be divisible by 400. So if the year is divisible by 400, then only it's a leap year, otherwise it's not a leap year. Similarly, if the year is not a century, that means the control will be given to this part of the program, this entire else. And inside this, I have nested another if else. If the year is divisible by 4, print leap year, otherwise print not a leap year. And I have followed it exactly the way they've said in the question. So if we run this, and since you won't be able to see me enter the value, I will also print the value right under it. Okay, now let's run it and check. So if I enter something like 2004, now this we know is a leap year because it is divisible by 4 and it's not a century. So what first happened was it checked whether the year is divisible by 100. In this case it's not, so the control was given to the else, and the else checked if the year is divisible by 4 and printed leap year. Similarly, I can do the same thing with a century. Suppose 1600. We know 1600 is obviously divisible by 400. So as you can see, it tells me that it is a leap year. But on the other hand, if I enter a century that's not divisible by 400, for example 1500, the control was given to this. And this saw that it's not divisible by 400, hence the control was given to the other else. So as you can see in this program, I have nested an if else inside this if, and I've nested an if else inside this else. So broadly, you need to understand how the logic of this is working. And this is just how you should do it when it comes to nested conditionals. Be clear with what each part is doing first, and inside that part, what you want to check. And then, if that part is not true, what you want to do. So, if you find this a little complicated, it's okay. If you've understood the logic, try it yourself. Sit down on Python and try it yourself. And yeah, if you aren't able to do it, you can just write in the comments, we'll help you out. Other than that, thank you for watching the video. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel and follow us on our socials. Link is in the description below. And if you want to practice more and do a few more quizzes prepared by our team, you can visit our website. Link is in the description below. Thank you for watching.